Alright, hello, so it's me, Wines, and in this kind of video, I would like to review a little bit about the first lecture of our, the foreign Vietnam foreign policy that I mentioned in the first video of this series. Okay, so let's talk about what is the foreign policy and some kind of key element of this kind of the cost. Okay, so first of all, I would like to tell you about the objective of this card that I am studying. The first one is a aim to provide theory and practice of the foreign policy, and then we also talk about the uh, history of foreign policy, and then we would like to analyze some key periods of Vietnam foreign policy, and then we also focus on analyzing relation with key partner of Vietnam. So with the very first lecture, we talk about some key element of foreign policy that teacher tell me that I need to focus on it. The first one is foreign policy is the objective or goals of national interest that are to be secured. And foreign policy is also a set of principle, policy, and decision adopted by the nation to achieve goal of national interest. Moreover, foreign policy is also particular policy or decision actually conducted from time to time, country to country, in the implementation of its international relation, and also the effectiveness of such policy decision is also pursue the goal of the nation as national interest. As foreign policy maybe can be or continue action by that nation to sustain or abandon such policy in the future. So you need to evaluate its policy whether or not it's still suitable with the context of, 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 of nation at that time, and they can decide to sustain or abandon it. Okay, and the second key point in this lesson is that the sort of foreign policy, sort of, sort of foreign policy refer to factor or situation element that affects or influence the formation of a nation policy toward other nation. It varies from time to time, country to country. Of course, it depends on different contexts, so it depends also on the nation, right? And foreign policy is guided and affected by both internal and external factors. And now I'm gonna give you 13 main factors that can affect foreign policy. The first key point is the geographical factor, and you can read some kind of books. The second, the second factor is the historical and social factor of the country. For example, you can see the India and Pakistan is a duration is affected and can consider as a legacy of the past history, and also the relation between the European nation after World War II, and also the relation between US and Japan after the World War II too. And the third factor is the size of the state territory as a factor. For example, you can see China with the large territory size and the large population, and it's also want to be big part of the region as a superpower in the world. And however, not only size can affect all of them, because you can see some example of the small nation, is but they can remain their influential roles in international environment. You can see Singapore and Israel as some example of good management, so it can maintain their position in the world, right? The second example is from Japan. They have really good technology in development, so it can perform their power, right? And also in the media, they have really risks oil resources, so is also affirmed their position in the international relation. The fourth factor is ideology factor. Some countries, some nations in the world want to spread out their ideological, so it can cause ideological conflict. And you can see some kind of example is from communism, democracy, or liberal ideology. And Cold War is one really specific example to show you that one side is want to spread out communism, and US and the alliance as one example of anti-communism, and this can lead to Cold War in the past, right? The fifth factor is the level of economic development factor. Yes, of course, economic development is really key factor, all right, that can affect international um, relation and of course foreign policy of country in the world. You can see US is have really strong economic development, so is can be considered as is major instrument of US foreign policy. And also the Russia weak economic development is quite weak, so it can adapt and change its foreign policy. Okay, and then we talk about the India steady economic development, so it can more and more have more and more opportunity to put their foreign policy in foreign relation, right? It can promote partnership with different country because of steady in economic development. And number six, factor here we talk about the internal and external factor. Of course, in the globalization in the international environment, so the external internal factor can affect each other, and it really understandable. And also the public opinion factor from leader of one nation also is another important input factor to foreign policy. And we also talk about government structure and political accountability factor. And this political accountability need to ensure effectiveness, accountability, and responsibility to their public, right? The modernized factor is talent and personality of the leader at a factor, and also diplomacy factor and international power structure factor, and also alliance and international treaty factor, and the last factor of the foreign policy is a technological factor. Okay, and now with the digital age of technology, you can see the importance, the significance of the high technological factor. If one nation can have really good, really high technological development, so it means that they can push economy, they can control, and they can expand opportunity to in international foreign relation. Okay, so this is kind of information, and it's the first lesson about the foreign policy. And in the next video, we're going to discuss about the historical concept of Vietnam and its pursuit to the foreign policy in this kind of historical concept. Okay, see you.